Something seemed to change for Luke Nichols in early 2025. Longtime fans of his Outdoor Boys channel began to notice something unusual. His once genuine laughter now sounded strained. The spark that made his adventures feel magical seemed dimmer. And even his kids, usually so at ease on camera, looked a bit uncomfortable. Then came the announcement that shattered millions of hearts. Luke revealed that he would be stepping away from Outdoor Boys for a while. But soon after, rumors began swirling online. Leaked messages and whispers from friends painted a different picture, one of exhaustion, emotional burnout, and challenges too personal to share publicly. The truth behind Luke's departure revealed a darker side of family fame, one filled with pressure, expectations, and personal battles no one had expected from America's favorite outdoor dad. Luke Nichols' story began far from the spotlight. Born in 1978 in Anchorage, Alaska, the wild wasn't just part of his surroundings. It was part of his identity. He grew up surrounded by snow-covered mountains, endless forests, and rivers so cold they could steal your breath away. His childhood was steeped in the silence of deep woods, the crackle of frozen ground underfoot, and the constant sound of rushing water. Before he could even form memories, Luke was already fishing with his family. They say he was barely a baby when he first joined salmon runs and trout trips. His father, grandfathers, and older brother taught him the essentials: how to cast a line, how to feel the pull of a fish, and how to respect the rhythm of nature. While other children were mastering video games, Luke was already hauling in Arctic char as though he had been born to do it. But for Luke, Alaska was never just about catching fish. It was about learning how to live. The wilderness became his classroom. He learned how to start a fire in pouring rain, how to build a shelter from branches and snow, and how to navigate the woods with nothing more than a knife and a sense of calm. Survival wasn't a lesson for him. It was simply life. Even as a teenager, Luke had a quiet steadiness that drew people in. When storms hit or tents collapsed, he stayed calm, cracking jokes as he worked to fix the problem. His humor, resilience, and skills made him the kind of person everyone wanted by their side when things went wrong. But beneath all that ruggedness, Luke's life was also deeply shaped by faith. He was raised in a family devoted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and their beliefs guided much of his early life. At 19, in 1997, he made a life-changing choice: to leave Alaska and travel across the world to Japan for a 2-year mission. Everything about it was unfamiliar: the language, the culture, the cities. But Luke adapted with quiet determination. He later described those 2 years as one of the most amazing experiences of his life. He learned Japanese, formed lasting friendships, and shared his faith with others. More importantly, he discovered a new sense of confidence, the kind that comes from facing the unknown and making it feel like home. When he returned to the U.S. in the late 1990s, Luke didn't go straight back to Alaska. Instead, he moved to Utah to attend Brigham Young University around the year 2000. Once again, he found himself surrounded by mountains, but this time his focus shifted to books and ideas. He studied political science, but his heart remained outdoors. While other students spent weekends buried in libraries, Luke was often out hiking, fishing, or exploring canyons. Nature remained his refuge, a grounding force that kept him balanced. Then, one day at a church gathering in Provo, he met Rebecca. She was intelligent, determined, and deeply faithful, much like Luke himself. Their bond wasn't dramatic or rushed. It was built on shared values, long conversations, and mutual respect. Rebecca saw past the rugged exterior and recognized the thoughtful, kind-hearted man beneath. She had her own ambitions and would go on to build an impressive career, but at that moment, they were simply two students dreaming about their futures together. Their connection grew steadily, and before long, it was clear that they were meant to share life's journey side by side. By the early 2000s, Luke had completed his degree, and soon after, he and Rebecca married. Together, they began building a life that would one day blend family, work, and adventure. Right after graduation, Luke jumped headfirst into the world of politics. He started his own consulting firm, helping political candidates plan and run their campaigns. For a man in his 20s, it was a bold move, but it worked. Within just 3 years, he had worked on about 20 campaigns, ranging from local races to higher-level contests. Luke quickly gained a reputation as a sharp strategist who could handle pressure and make things happen, but success came at a price. Luke later admitted that the political world drained him completely. The long hours, constant travel, and unrelenting stress began to take their toll. By this time, he and Rebecca were newly married and dreaming of starting a family. The idea of raising children while working endless 100-hour weeks in such a demanding environment began to feel impossible. So Luke made one of the most courageous decisions of his life. He shut down his business. It wasn't about giving up. It was about reclaiming his peace. He realized that no amount of success was worth sacrificing his marriage or future family. Around the mid-2000s, Luke and Rebecca packed up their lives in Utah and moved across the country to Virginia. It was a clean slate and a conscious choice. Luke decided to return to school, this time to study law. He enrolled at George Mason University's School of Law, now the Antonin Scalia Law School, near Washington, D.C. Over the next 3 years, he immersed himself in his studies focusing on criminal law. In 2008, he earned his Juris Doctor degree, passed the bar exam, and launched his own legal practice. Luke specialized in criminal defense, particularly traffic law. To outsiders, it might have seemed dull compared to the adventures he'd later share online, but Luke approached it with discipline and care. He became known for his attention to detail and his ability to navigate complex cases. His reputation grew quickly, giving him something he had long been searching for: stability. He and Rebecca settled in Northern Virginia, buying a quiet home in the countryside where they could breathe and raise a family. Their family began to grow in the early 2010s. Their first son, Thomas, affectionately known as Tommy, was born around 2012 or 2013. A few years later came Nathan, or Nate, and then their youngest, Jacob. The Nichols household was filled with laughter, chaos, and the simple joys of childhood. Life was full, busy, and beautiful. Luke spent his days in court as a respected attorney and his evenings as a loving father, reading bedtime stories and taking his boys on small fishing trips in the backyard. Rebecca was thriving too, building an impressive career of her own as the Director of Education at the American Statistical Association in Washington, D.C. Together, they built a life rooted in faith, learning, and family values. Sundays were for church, and evenings were for fireflies, laughter, and outdoor play. Then, in 2013, Luke combined his love for nature with a spark of creativity. Between long hours at his law office and sleepless nights with a newborn, he found himself craving the calm of the wild once again. So one weekend, he grabbed a camera, set it up by the river, and began recording. That was the start of his first YouTube channel, Catfish and Carp. There was no big plan, just Luke sharing his passion for fishing. He focused on the big catches, catfish, and carp, species most anglers overlooked but he adored. His videos were simple, real, and full of heart. On weekdays, Luke was a sharp-suited lawyer. On weekends, he transformed into the man fans would come to love, a cheerful fisherman with muddy boots, a big grin, and a knack for storytelling. Viewers weren't drawn in by fancy editing or high-end gear. They were drawn in by Luke's authenticity. His hands were calloused, his advice practical, and his laughter genuine. Over time, his small YouTube channel grew into something much bigger, an extension of the life he'd built and the man he'd always been, humble, hard-working, and connected to nature. People began to take notice of Luke Nichols' growing presence online. Within just a few short years, his channel Catfish and Carp had crossed the 100,000 subscriber mark, a milestone that earned him YouTube's silver play button. That simple plaque in the mail became a turning point. It was the moment Luke realized that something much bigger might be unfolding. But as time went on, he noticed the channel wasn't growing at the same pace. Fishing remained his passion, but the niche was narrow and YouTube was evolving fast. By the mid-2010s, his growth had slowed, and Luke began thinking beyond rods and reels. His sons, Tommy and Nate, were no longer toddlers. They were growing up fast, now old enough to join him on his outdoor adventures. Tiny boots stomped through the dirt, chasing frogs and climbing over rocks, and Luke had an idea. He wondered, what if this channel wasn't just about fishing anymore? What if it could capture family life, the laughter, the messes, and the magic of the great outdoors? What if viewers could see a real family roasting marshmallows, camping, and learning together? On May 5, 2015, Luke and his wife, Rebecca, decided to test that vision. They launched a second channel, Outdoor Boys. Their very first video wasn't glamorous or polished. There was no dramatic intro or fancy editing, just the family walking through the woods with their boys. The camera followed them as they hiked, camped, built rafts, played in rivers, and tried silly survival tricks just for fun. There was something refreshing and authentic about watching a dad and his kids get dirty, mess up, laugh, and keep going anyway. It wasn't a Hollywood production of outdoor life. It was real, raw, and relatable. Some videos taught viewers how to build tarp shelters or cook over a fire, while others captured the boys sleeping in homemade forts or metal detecting in forgotten fields. There were experiments with knife-making, DIY boat building, and plenty of hilarious fails that Luke simply laughed off. Yet Luke didn't abandon Catfish and Carp. He ran both channels side by side. The fishing channel remained a haven for hardcore anglers, a place filled with deep dives into gear, monster catches, and expert-level tips. Meanwhile, Outdoor Boys grew into something entirely different, a blend of family, storytelling, and wilderness adventures. One day he might film a peaceful solo fishing trip. The next, he'd capture Tommy proudly reeling in his first fish. One channel focused on skill, the other on heart. By the end of 2015, that family-centered gamble paid off. Outdoor Boys quickly exploded in popularity, pulling in hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Viewers from all over the world were tuning in to see toddlers building fires, getting muddy, and discovering the wild for the very first time. The production wasn't perfect. Luke often used a simple GoPro, and Rebecca filmed while balancing a child on her hip, but that unpolished charm made it even more real. Soon, Catfish and Carp surpassed 1.1 million subscribers, and Outdoor Boys was catching up fast. Luke had unknowingly built something rare, a digital home where families could laugh together, feel inspired, and rediscover the beauty of being outdoors. By 2017, what started as a quiet side project had turned into a YouTube phenomenon. Luke's calm voice, creative storytelling, and natural warmth pulled people in. The entire Nichols family had become familiar faces, and before long, they hit the 1 million subscriber mark. That golden play button wasn't just a symbol of success. It was proof that something genuine and meaningful was happening. People couldn't get enough of it. Whether Luke was building an igloo with his kids in the middle of a snowstorm or struggling to start a fire with sticks while the boys cheered him on, every video made you smile. The content entertained, but it also subtly taught valuable lessons about patience, curiosity, and perseverance. As Luke evolved, so did his videos. The short clips turned into full-length episodes, sometimes stretching past 30 minutes, even an hour, filled with cinematic stories of canoeing through remote Canadian lakes or constructing a full log cabin with hand tools. His storytelling wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty. Luke showed the hard parts, storms destroying progress, small injuries, and moments of frustration. But he never quit filming. He simply kept going. By 2020, everything changed. After a decade as a lawyer, Luke found that YouTube was now earning more than his law practice ever did. That year, he made a life-changing decision. He left the courtroom behind to become a full-time content creator. He kept his law license as a safety net, but his heart clearly belonged outdoors. As Luke put it, traveling and fishing had become bigger than my law career. Once he fully committed, everything grew. The adventures became more daring, the builds more ambitious, and his sons more confident. One winter, Luke and little Nate built a snow shelter and spent the night inside with nothing but a candle for warmth. Another time, he and Tommy survived on a deserted island, living off coconuts and freshly caught fish. These weren't stage stunts. They were real, multi-day journeys into the wild. The Nichols family didn't limit their adventures to America either. Luke took everyone to Australia, where the boys learned to throw boomerangs and encountered animals they'd only read about. In one unforgettable moment, Tommy stood near a crocodile in shallow water, while Luke filmed from just a few feet away. A heart-stopping scene that ended safely, but became legendary among fans. Over time, Outdoor Boys became more than a channel. It turned into a symbol of family, faith, and the simple joy of exploration. People didn't just watch for entertainment, they watched to feel something. Families viewed it together, parents saw the power of involving their kids, and children got a glimpse of nature without screens or filters. Viewers learned how to catch fish with handmade traps, cook over open flames, and most importantly, create memories that would last forever. By the end of 2023, Outdoor Boys was everywhere. Clips from the channel went viral across TikTok, with the hashtag Outdoor Boys appearing in thousands of videos and gaining tens of millions of views. Even people who had never seen a full episode began recognizing Luke, the friendly guy with glasses who made wilderness adventures look fun, wholesome, and possible. Then came the surge. In late 2023, the channel reached about 6 million subscribers. By May 2025, that number had skyrocketed to over 15.3 million, a jaw-dropping growth of 9 million new fans in just over a year. With more than 500 videos in the library, Outdoor Boys became one of YouTube's most binge-worthy channels. Some individual videos racked up over 14 million views and were estimated to earn hundreds of thousands of dollars each. The channel became a thriving business, with sponsorships, merchandise, and side projects pushing the Outdoor Boys brand value to around $4.5 million. Luke's personal net worth climbed close to $9 million. But that was never what mattered to him. Whenever he spoke to his audience, it was clear what his priorities were: his family, his faith, and his happiness. Then, in mid-2025, Luke shocked millions. He didn't leave YouTube because of burnout or declining views. The channel was actually at its peak. Instead, he chose to step away from fame and money on his own terms. He released what many fans believed to be his final Outdoor Boys video, even as views continued to climb and global attention soared. News of his decision spread like wildfire across the internet. Outlets in the US, UK, India, and beyond covered the story. Some called it a retirement, others a hiatus. But the message was clear. Luke Nichols was putting his faith and his family first. And for those who had followed his journey for years, it didn't come as a surprise. It was exactly the kind of ending, or perhaps new beginning, that perfectly fit the man who had always chosen heart over hype. It was classic Luke, calm, thoughtful, and true to who he had always been. When Luke made his big announcement, he didn't cry or turn it into an emotional spectacle. But even without tears, every word carried incredible weight. He talked about time, not in some vague, distant way, but in a deeply personal and urgent sense. He was tired, truly tired. What most people didn't realize was how much work happened behind the scenes. Viewers saw the funny camping moments, the epic builds, and the warm family adventures, but they never saw the sleepless nights. They didn't see Luke editing until dawn while his kids were asleep or balancing the exhausting rhythm of being both a full-time YouTuber and a stay-at-home dad. The truth was, he had been wearing too many hats for too long. Creator, father, husband, editor. And that pressure was finally catching up to him. Then came the line that defined his new chapter. "Fishing's not the most important thing in my life. My faith and my family are." It wasn't just a quote to fill a speech. It was a principle he was finally ready to live by. Luke went on to talk about something few fans had ever considered: privacy. Some strangers had begun showing up near his home. They weren't dangerous, just overly curious, well-meaning fans. But for Luke, that was a red flag. His children were growing up in a spotlight they never asked for, and that realization struck him deeply. He said, "There's more than one reason I'm doing this, but I mainly want to focus on my kids. I want to spend more time helping Tommy with his channel and preparing him to be an adult, which is going to be in less than 6 years." There was a quiet urgency in those words, a kind of panic that comes when a parent suddenly realizes how fast childhood disappears. Tommy was already becoming a teenager, and in 6 short years, he'd be 18. Luke also confessed something personal. He had spent so much time building and perfecting outdoor boys that he had lost sight of others in the process. Now it was time to shift the focus, to invest in people, not projects. And that shift wasn't just noble. It was deeply personal. All 3 of his sons were starting to dream of creating their own YouTube content. Luke even laughed about it during his announcement. Tommy already had his own channel, Outdoor Tom, and even young Nate had begun showing interest in filming fishing trips. Luke likely knew that if he kept pushing outdoor boys to greater heights, his kids might never have the space to build something of their own. By stepping back, he wasn't quitting YouTube. He was quietly, humbly passing the torch. When he said, "This is going to be my last video for a while. Not goodbye, not farewell, just for a while," fans could tell he chose every word carefully. That phrasing offered a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe he wasn't gone forever. He even hinted that there were half-finished videos, homestead updates, camping adventures, and travel clips that he might release someday, maybe at the end of the year, maybe never. He left the door slightly open, just enough to keep fans wondering. The response was overwhelming, but not with anger, with gratitude. Since YouTube comments were turned off, messages poured in across social media. Many fans thanked him for years of wholesome, meaningful entertainment. Parents, especially, understood. One message summed it up perfectly. "Thank you for showing the world what real family fun looks like, and for knowing when to put your family first." Some viewers hoped he'd return one day, others were in denial, but most accepted his decision with warmth and respect. In the days that followed, Luke gave a few interviews to clarify his decision. He explained that this wasn't about YouTube at all. It was about being present, being a husband, being a dad, being a man of faith. He said, "Following Jesus. Christ made me a better man, husband, and father, and now he wanted to live that truth more fully." He didn't close any doors either. Maybe one day he'd return to law, maybe he'd blend his legal background with his outdoor knowledge, or maybe he'd simply spend more time doing the things that mattered most, helping his kids with homework, cheering from the bleachers at Little League, or fishing in peace without a camera watching. One thing he made clear: Outdoor Boys would remain online. The channel wouldn't disappear. The videos and adventures would stay up, preserved for anyone who wanted to revisit them. But the family's next adventures would be private. No uploads, no sponsorships, no schedules. Just life as it was meant to be lived. The Nichols family wasn't vanishing. They were simply stepping away from the stage. By mid-2025, Luke Nichols had completely stepped out of the public eye. His focus had shifted entirely toward faith, family, and the wilderness he'd always loved. Their dream property in Alaska had become their quiet retreat, a place where the noise of city life couldn't reach them. They still kept their home in Virginia, where Rebecca continued her career and the boys followed their routines. Luke spent his days surrounded by family, helping Tommy grow his channel from behind the scenes. Tommy, who would turn 18 in 2030, was slowly carving out his own path as a young creator, perhaps even destined to surpass his father's success one day. Luke might still make an occasional appearance, but his role had changed. He was now behind the camera, the quiet guide instead of the star. Nate and Jacob, the younger two, were finally getting what Tommy never fully had: a childhood away from cameras. Just hikes, fishing trips, laughter, and ordinary moments that didn't need to be recorded or shared. That was Luke's greatest gift to them. Financially, Luke was secure. His estimated net worth had reached over $9 million by the time he walked away. Years of hard work, smart decisions, and frugal living had given him the freedom to stop chasing views and live on his own terms. He didn't need to keep winning. He had already won. For Luke Nichols, stepping back wasn't a loss. It was peace. It was purpose. It was the start of a quieter, more meaningful adventure. One lived not for the audience, but for the people who mattered most.